are in some ways under attack by the President of the United States, those values being tolerance, inclusivity, and diversity. And they want to make sure that she carries with her that message when she talks to the President of the United States.
Erin McLaughlin, thanks very much. She's with the Women's March protesters in central London. Thank you. Christiane Amanpour joins me now live. A remarkable news conference in which the U.S. president really just did a damage control times 1,000.
It's called a 180, spinning on a dime, blinking.
Just dialed back pretty much everything that he said in that Sun interview, even calling parts of his own interview fake news.
Right, and I must say the contrast of just seeing all these people here in London, which is why he bypassed London, protesting quietly but with conviction, and that amount of sort of pomp out there at Chequers and Blenheim. Look, the president was over the top effusive about the Prime Minister this afternoon. He wanted to really do damage control because I don't know what he thought, that the interview was going to be published and that she wouldn't see it. I don't know. Yeah. But certainly in front of her, he was not as bold at all about her. In fact, the reverse, that he was to a third party. So that's what happened. He also bigged up NATO. He again and again said that we're stronger, we're unified, I'm going to Putin with a strong NATO. And by the way, I've made all the allies pay much more, and that's why they're paying much more. So on that issue, but I think on the, immigration is where his true core values are. The others are sort of just stuff that he has to talk about. But immigration, he genuinely believes is a bad thing, that migrants have caused a bad situation in the United States. And as you heard him again say, and it's quite significant language, it's very distasteful language, because he again doubles down and says what he said to the Sun, that migration has changed the color and the culture of Europe, and not in a positive way. And that's his core belief. And of course, I spoke to the mayor today, Sadiq Khan, who he also took aim at in that Sun interview, and the mayor was very clear that immigration was a huge, and so did, by the way, Theresa May in front of President Trump, stuck up for immigration in this country and how it underpinned the culture and the fabric of this country for decades and decades.
I mean, saying that immigration is harmful to the culture, to the fabric, I mean...
And it's not just immigration, Hala, you know very well, it's Muslims.
Right, Muslims, people from Africa, from Afghanistan, from Syria, especially if he's referencing the German situation as well. And that's going to sound quite frightening for people.
But it is frightening, and to be honest with you, it's factually not correct as well. He's trying to say, and he said about Germany, and he said this, a couple of weeks ago, that not only is it changing the color, the fabric of your cultures, but it is creating a massive crime spike. It's not true. Even Angela Merkel's political opponent, well, he's actually her coalition partner, but nonetheless her rival, who is the interior minister, put out the facts. The fact is that the crime has been sinking in Germany by a hefty percentage over the last few years, including since all those people came in 2015. And even if you look in the United States, majority migrant communities have less crime than indigenous communities, so it makes no sense. However, it is a whistle, whatever they call it, a dog whistle, a siren, this tribalism, this identity politics. And he knows it because he says, that's why I was elected in the United States. And we know it because that led to the Brexit vote. We know it. It did. And it's this nostalgia for a past that will not come back, that is a white Christian past. And that's not what America is anymore.
And as you mentioned,
it's not what Europe is.
Relying in facts in that crime is lower in immigrant communities. Immigration is usually a plus economically as well for countries, because people who come to a country come because there's work, they pay taxes. I mean, all of these positive aspects of immigration are getting lost.
They're getting lost. I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, yes, there's been terrorism, but as we know, certainly the terrorism in the United States is not because of refugees who went in, and it's not because of refugees who came here. It's a much more complicated situation. I will say that Sadiq Khan is one of the few leaders who will take on President Trump. When President Trump attacks him, and it started with President Trump attacking him, and it's gone on for the last couple of years, this long-running feud since before Trump was president. Sadiq wrote in the Evening Standard, which is a prominent evening daily here, that, look, we have a special relationship, but when you have best friends, you must be honest to them, especially if they're not living up to our shared values. That is what I seek to do. I put that question to him. Let's just listen to what he said.
Look, I'm quite clear. Look, I love America. I love Americans, as do many Londoners and maybe many people in my country. Because you are our closest ally, we have a special relationship, my expectations of you are higher than they would be of a leader of another country. I'll be frank about that. So my expectations of a president of the USA are different to my expectations of a president of Turkey or another country we could name around the world. Just like a best friend, the expectations I have of a best friend are higher than of just a friend or an acquaintance. So I expect this from our close ally. I expect this from other countries. Similarly, NATO, at its core, is the US relationship. US, Canada, and the European countries, Turkey as well. And I just think, we shouldn't cower to people whose views we disagree with, particularly if they're close mates. I wouldn't dream of being scared to express to my best friend my views about something he or she was doing that I disagreed with. Similarly, I don't understand why our Prime Minister and others across the world are afraid to say to President Trump, you know what, we agree with you on many, many things, but we think you're wrong on this. This is why we think you're wrong. And I think it's important more of us are courageous.
He's pretty blunt, and it's absolutely who he is, and he's not afraid to speak the truth. President Trump says, and this is his cover, what I say about immigration may not be politically correct, but it's not correct. Forget politically correct. The figures he uses, the conflation he makes between migrants and crime are not correct. Of course there needs to be an organized immigration policy by every country. As the experts are now saying, there needs to be sustainable migration, because they have to be able to distinguish between real migrants that they need for their labor force, real refugees seeking persecution, and those who are just coming because they'd rather come for economic reasons and a better life. So there needs to be sustainable migration. But the ugly side of it that President Trump points to is not backed up by the facts.
And this is coming, of course, against the backdrop of these immigrant children being separated from their parents at the border, their families at the border, and put in, caged kind of areas.
Between Mexico and the US.
Exactly right. So you have, and what many of the protesters we spoke to said, we're not just protesting the visit, we're protesting those images.
And that's very important. They're protesting policies, including what they consider to be misogynistic and sexist policies, or at least sexist and misogynistic attitudes coming from the highest elected leader of the United States.
Quick word on the meeting with the Queen tomorrow. I wonder how
this afternoon.
Apologies. This
right
afternoon,
now.
Tea with the Queen. That's going to be. She's met every president except Lyndon Johnson. She's not her first rodeo. I do wonder how that's going to go.
I must say, I'm quite interested in that, because clearly she also understands that there's a special relationship, as the president again reiterated and really elevated it even higher than he has done before. But the US and the UK have been historic allies through thick and thin, through the worst troubles and the greatest triumphs. But she's also somebody who believes in protocol and obviously the proper way of behavior. I wonder what she will think about the president briefing against the elected prime minister, as reported in The Sun. I really would like to know what she thinks of that, and if she says anything, even in a side-handed manner.
But there's always, when you meet the Queen, there's a lot that you need to remember in terms of protocol, etiquette, what not to do, don't put your hand around, really Americans are much more open and warm when it comes to kind of greeting.
But you remember, Michelle Obama put her hand around the Queen, and everybody here freaked out. Oh my God, what a breach of protocol. Actually, it wasn't. If you remember, the Queen reciprocated just to show everybody that it's okay and I don't mind. So there's, it depends who, I think. Apparently the President and Melania Trump have a 15-minute slot.
We'll see. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Christiane Amanpour, thanks very much. Straight ahead, Donald Trump will be face-to-face with Vladimir Putin in the coming days. The U.S. president says he will ask about Russian meddling in American elections. We'll go to Moscow for a live report. We'll be right back.